Hello and welcome to this week's Used Car Heaven. Now, each week on the programme we give you a completely unbiased look at buying a used car. In part one this week we've got three family estates from Peugeot, Renault and Toyota on test. And in part two we pit a BMW 3 Series against the relatively new Alfa 156, which should be rather interesting. That's on this week's Used Car Heaven. So, three estates to put on test. We have a Renault Laguna, it's a 2.2 turbo diesel RT, a Toyota Avensis 1.8 GS estate, and finally the Peugeot 306 estate, a 1.8 XS. They're all manual, 2 petrol and 1 diesel. Interestingly, the Laguna was the most expensive of the three cars when it was new about 18 months ago. Now, it's the cheapest, it's lost some £8,000. The Toyota and the Peugeot have lost £6,000. John, what do you make of the Toyota Avensis?
Well, we have quite a few Toyota Avensises through our hands, and really they're quite a trouble-free car. You know, we don't sort of see them back for any problems. They're a very good, well-made Japanese car.
When was the Avensis first introduced? Did it replace something? Was it the Carina originally?
That's right, yes, it replaced the Carina and came out in three forms, which is the hatch, the saloon and the estate car. In late '97.
Now, we know Japanese cars are well known for great reliability. What about sort of value-wise? How do they generally hold up?
Well, I would say no different really than any other manufacturer. The first 12 months of its life is normally the most crucial for depreciation, and with this particular vehicle, I think this is probably depreciated somewhere in the region of around the £6,000 mark.
Now, I can remember driving the Toyota Avensis Saloon when it was first launched, about 18 months or so ago, and thinking, yeah, this is a decent car, built by Toyota, well put together, it's going to be reliable, it's bulletproof engines, reasonable styling, but just being very unimpressed by the way that the Avensis drove on the road. Its handling was unengaging, it didn't offer much fun, which is perhaps its biggest letdown, because inside it's actually reasonably well styled for a Japanese car. Sure, there's masses of grey plastic as we've come to expect. They've finally done things like put the indicators on the same side, the left-hand side, as we come to expect on most European cars. So that's a move forward from other Japanese cars. Now, in the Avensis range there are 4 engines to choose from. There's the base 1.6, there's this 1.8 GS with 108 brake horsepower, there's a 2 litre with 126 brake horsepower, and of course a turbo diesel in the range too. 4 different model types. There's an S, a GS, a GLS, and the top of the range CDX, and each one of course gets a bit more equipment. Mind you, this 1.8 GS is pretty well equipped. This gets air conditioning and an electric sunroof, electric front windows, twin airbags, and a decent stereo system too. Now, although this 1.8 engine may seem a little underpowered at just over 100 brake horsepower, in reality it's actually not. It zips along quite nicely. Very slick 5-speed gearbox, nice light clutch. The steering is perhaps on the lightish side, if anything, could do with a bit more feedback to the driver, but apart from that it drives well. It's quiet and refined in the cabin. There's a good deal of room all round for plenty of passengers and a fair bit of luggage space in the rear too, and it's actually quite a nicely styled estate car. You know what some manufacturers are like, they decide to bring an estate car version out of their saloon or hatchback and just get it completely wrong. I don't think Toyota have done that with the Avensis. It's a smart, stylish car. So when it was new, this car cost, what, £16,000, and now it's dropped by about £6,000?
Around the £6,000 mark, yes. It seems to be around that norm for this smaller car, or mid-range car. That seems to be the ballpark figure that they seem to depreciate by. It seems that the price that they're originally set out new must be a little over the mark, and that's where they seem to bottom out at after the 12-month period.
But I mean, the most sensible thing, I guess, is not to buy new and wait for a year or so till they they drop in price and buy it for £6,000 less than the original list price.
That's right. That is the greatest saving that you can make. Yeah. And of course, the car is still hopefully in a fair condition. If you can drop on a car that's a sensible mileage and condition, then that's where you make your greatest saving. And a good reliable car then hopefully for the next 3 or 4 years.
So the 1.8 XS in the 306 estate range is the sporty little number. It's been given a bit of a sports makeover. In fact, what it actually gets is a sports steering wheel, sports gear shift with leather on that as well, and a sort of aluminium style dashboard, which looks a bit cheap and plasticky, which it actually is. This also gets air conditioning and Recaro style sports seats with a rather garish trim, if the truth be told. Inside though, it's well built, it's well put together, there's plenty of room. A lot of people would say, why buy a 306 estate when you can have the much bigger 406 estate? And when you're looking on the used market, you'll probably find a 406 estate like this, similar age, similar mileage, for about the same money as this. But I guess at the end of the day, if people are on a limited budget and they don't want quite as big a car because all the hassle of parking and that sort of thing, well, the 306 is a very worthy alternative. As we've already mentioned, this car when it was new cost £16,000. It's now worth round about £10,000. So in the first 12 months has taken a fair hit in depreciation. And that makes you think why on earth you would buy this car new. Because a year down the line, you could pick up an S-Reg example with 8,000 miles on the clock for £6,000 less, which really makes you think. If you're looking for a sporty estate, well, I would suggest the 306 XS that we're in now. This is a 1.8 engine producing 103 brake horsepower. There are a good variety of engines in the 306 estate range, starting at base 1.4, which if anything would probably be a bit underpowered, moving up to the 1.6 and then this 1.8. And you can also choose 2 diesel engines, both 1.9 diesel and a 1.9 turbo diesel. Handling wise, it's actually pretty good. You can throw the car about a bit and have a bit of fun. The steering is precise and offers a fair amount of feedback through to the driver. One thing I don't like about the car is the way that the clutch is fairly sharp and sticky. It seems to bite very, very early. Also, the gear change is perhaps not as slick and smooth as you would like, but you're in a sportier car, so I guess I can accept that. This is a 2.2 turbo diesel RT model. What was this new and what's it sort of worth now? It's about 18 months old, this one, isn't it?
Yeah, this car a little more expensive than the previous models we spoke of, in that it's I think it started off at about £17,500, and because of its time that it's run now, I would say it's probably depreciated a fraction more than the others, in that it's probably retailing today for around the 9.5 mark, which is a considerable amount more depreciation than the other models.
So it's lost some, 45% or so, hasn't it, over an 18-month time, which is a fair chunk if you're a private buyer.
It is, yes. I would say that's probably put down to its lifespan, and there are a fair few of them around to be purchased, so that must reflect, I suppose, in its residual value. And obviously it is coming to the end of its life, so that would obviously be another factor that would affect its residual value.
Now, Renault knew when they wanted to replace the ageing 21 and Savannah range that they had to come up with a decent car that would appeal to the masses, basically. And that's what they came up with in the shape of the Laguna. It had to be something that would take on the like of the Ford Mondeo, the Vauxhall Cavalier, or the Vauxhall Vectra as it now is, and the Laguna has pretty well succeeded. It's been a popular car in the UK, and there are plenty of examples on the road. It first came out in saloon form in 1994, and the estate followed about 2 or so years later. This is a 2.2 turbo diesel estate, not exactly very powerful, I have to say. It's rather sluggish. The gear change is just very bizarre as well, because it's just completely imprecise, which takes a bit of getting used to. This has done some 24,000 miles. This is a 1.5 years old, but it's lost some 45% of its original new price. Fuel consumption figures for the turbo diesel are not particularly good either, you have to say. You would expect something reasonable, but this is a big car, it's a heavy car, so you should get between about 39 and 48 miles to your gallon of diesel. So we like the exterior styling of the Laguna estate. Inside it's a bit bland, to be honest. I thought the French were all full of flair. Maybe they were on a day off and this particular one was style inside, because it's just sort of, it's all right, but it doesn't exactly spring you think, wow, like the look of this. You get a good choice of engines in the Laguna range, starting with the base 1.6 model, then there's a 1.8 and a 2-litre petrol, and two diesel engines, a 2.2 diesel and a 2.2 turbo diesel, which is the one that we're in at the moment. Now, this turbo diesel hardly sets the world on fire, so what the non-turbo diesel would be like on the road, I wouldn't like to think. Now, the main reason that you would buy an estate car, hopefully anyway, is that you want lots of load carrying capacity. Either you've got lots of kids or perhaps for business or something like that. Otherwise you would buy a saloon or a hatchback, surely. So let's compare the three models we've been testing. First of all, the Laguna boot, as you can see, absolutely enormous. I mean, would you really want anything much bigger than that? The one advantage the Laguna can have as well is that you can find models that seat up to 7. It has an extra row of seats back here, which is quite a neat idea if you've got a big family. Now, the Avensis may seem fairly small on the outside, but actually when you come inside and look at the boot, again, a pretty decent load carrying area. Nicely trimmed, very smart, and with a security cover that just pulls over there and hooks in fairly easily, he says, to there, which it does. Shut that one away. And finally, the Peugeot, which is the smallest of the three cars that we've had on test. And again, pleasantly surprised at the amount of space you get in the 306 estate. Now, that is not bad for a small to medium-sized car. And again, you have a security cover which folds neatly over there and looks rather good too. Well, hopefully we've given you some ideas if you're looking at the moment for a family estate. We've had three. We've had the Peugeot, the Avensis from Toyota, and the Renault Laguna estate. There's no doubt that the Laguna is the biggest of the three. Plenty of space for all the family and their usual bits and bobs that go with it. It's the oldest car that we've had on test, and consequently it's probably the cheapest car you'll find about. You should be able to look for a 1.6 Laguna estate for about £6,000. I particularly like the Toyota Avensis. It doesn't drive perhaps as well as you'd hope for, but it's well built, it's solid, and it's holding its value very well. A 1.6 basic Avensis estate will still cost you somewhere around £10,000. But if you want a bit of fun, well, look to something like the Peugeot 306 XS estate. Very, very impressive to drive, and something that's a bit sporty as well. A 1.4 Peugeot 306 estate will cost you perhaps just around £7,000. Well, that's it for part one of Used Car Heaven. Join us again soon in part two. We've got a BMW and an Alfa Romeo to test. Hello and welcome back to part two of Used Car Heaven. So we've got the family estates out of the way. It's time now to have a bit of fun, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, we've got a BMW 3 Series, a 318 saloon, against a rather gorgeous Alfa Romeo 156. Now, of course, the Alfa is the newer of the two cars. It's only been around about a year and a half now. The 3 Series, well, that's the old 3 Series, and that's been updated by a new 3 Series saloon. That's a 2.5 V6, this is a 318. But which is the better buy, particularly in the long term, which is going to hold its value better, and which, most importantly, is the better car to drive? John, this is a previous shape 318 SE. Are people still attracted to these models now that there is a new 3 Series saloon out?
Yes, it appears that it's still selling very well. It may be that there is new models, and this car still has quite a high demand. It sells very well still.
What is it you think that attracts people to buy a 1.8, 1.9 litre engine that hasn't got any great performance at the end of the day, and inside some people will say it's not tremendously well equipped? Is it just that badge on the front that they want to see parked in their driveway at night?
Yes, I presume that a lot of them do buy it for the badge, but they still are a very well engineered car, very well made. They do last. The build quality is superb of the BMW, and it remains that way, and I'm sure people will keep buying them for that one reason. I think it will hold up fairly well. Obviously, when a new model does come out, then it does affect residuals on the previous models. They start to become a little old hat, but as you said earlier, people will still keep buying them for the badge.
I guess like all of sort of premium cars, quality cars, you must have a proper, fully stamped up service history from a main dealer.
That's the main criteria when you're buying something like a BMW, to have a full service history for a vehicle, and when obviously you come to sell it again, fully documented history is a must, really.
What sort of difference can that make to values down the road? Can it have a substantial difference in what you might be offered if you've got a main dealer service history against your local garages who've done it?
Oh yes, it is a substantial difference. If you have a fully documented BMW service history, then it's something to tell a story about, and rather than the chap round the corner who does your servicing, it is a much better documented history.
Now, there's no doubt that BMW build very, very good cars, but my main gripe with BMW, and particularly if you're looking for this style of 3 Series that's maybe 4 or 5 years older than this S-plated one, is that you'll find that car and you'll get inside it and you'll start looking around for things like electric windows, electric sunroof, even a radio stereo system, which didn't come as standard then, heaven forbid any air conditioning, and you won't find it because they were just very, very basic cars. Only when they started to run out of this particular model, this is the 318 SE, did they start to put the sort of things that you would expect to find on a quality luxury car like BMW as standard. So you find a 5-year-old 318. It's got very little on it. It's got a 1.8 engine with 115 brake horsepower under the bonnet, which, let's face it, is a car that you can't really have a great deal of fun in. Now, BMW make great play of the fact that they produce cars with a great chassis, near perfect weight distribution, 50-50, rear-wheel drive, which is perhaps the main advantage that the 3 Series has over the Alfa 156, which is a front-wheel drive car. But whether those sort of things really matter at the end of the day when you're tootling around town and very occasionally getting the chance to have a bit of fun in, I'm not quite so sure. It is a very well engineered package though, there's no doubt about that. The steering is very precise, it offers a good deal of feedback to the driver, the gear change is nice and slick, and all round it's a comfortable car, a cruiser rather than a sporty car. There's no doubt that the Alfa 156 is a gorgeous car to look at, and it's probably only fairly recently that Alfa Romeo have managed to get rid of that bad reputation and image that they had for so long, probably dating back to the 70s, and it's cars like this that have really done it for them, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is a stunning looking vehicle, as you said, and yes, I think the image is well behind them now. They really do manufacture a superb vehicle. Again, as I say, it is a stunning vehicle, and again with reliability and quality to counteract it, it is a very good car.
I mean, what sort of things were going wrong back in the 70s when they had that sort of reputation? Was it they were just sort of rust buckets?
Yes, there was problem with corrosion and electrical problems, and I think it generally just a niggly car at times, and they seem to have really got into business now, and this is a very, very well produced car.
Now this car is an S-plate, it's only about a year old, it's done some 20-odd thousand miles, which is perhaps maybe a little over for its age. How's it holding up value-wise?
Well, in actual fact it's holding its value extremely well. Although it is up slightly on the mileage around the 20 odd, it still has a resaleable value of around the £18,000 mark, which in actual fact, you know, is tremendous for a car with a little higher than average mileage on it.
There's no doubt that there's intense rivalry in the executive car sector in this style of car. We've got the BMW 3 Series, the Audi A4, the Mercedes C-Class, and the new guy on the street, the guy with all the street cred in the smart Italian designer suits, is of course the Alfa Romeo 156, launched about a year and a half ago. And I can remember going on the original launch back in Spain and just completely falling in love with the car, because not only does it look stunning both inside and out, it really is a joy to drive. Now this is the 2.5 V6 that we're in, so we're being perhaps slightly unkind to the BMW because that's only the 318, but this 2.5 V6 produces 190 brake horsepower. From the moment that you start the engine up and you hear that wonderful V6 growl from under the bonnet, rev it hard and it just sounds fantastic. Now jumping from the BMW 3 Series into the Alfa 156, well, it's just so different. It's almost like chalk and cheese. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with the BMW 3 Series. It's a very well built car, but this is just so stylish. The oval dials, the smart dashboard, the clock and temperature gauge and fuel gauge that point towards you from the dashboard. This is very well equipped as well. It's got automatic air conditioning, power steering, ABS brakes, all the usual things that you would expect on this sort of car. There are 3 different models in the 156 range at the moment to choose from. The base 1.8, which perhaps if anything is maybe a touch underpowered. Then there's the 150 brake horsepower 2 litre, and this 2.5 V6 Stormer. Well, 2 quality executive cars in the form of the BMW 3 Series and the Alfa Romeo 156. Of course, with the 3 Series, you know exactly what you're going to get, a well-built German car. It will go and go and go as long as you look after it and keep it well serviced. It's perhaps not the most thrilling of cars, but it's solid, it's reliable. The Alfa 156 is a completely different kettle of fish, we think. It looks great now, it will look great in years to come. Our one concern may be perhaps over reliability and how it will stand the test of time. We don't think there will be any problems, but at this stage it's too new a car to know. Residuals are holding up very well at the moment, but then again, maybe in 3 or 4 years' time they will suddenly reach that sort of peak and then begin to drop rather sharply. But if I was driving home tonight and I had to pick between the 2 of them, it would have to be the Alfa 156. That's the car I'd have the most fun in. That's it for this week's Used Car Heaven. Join us again on Men and Motors at the same time next week.